Confidence is not something you are simply born with. It is something you construct through repeated behavior. Every day you are giving yourself evidence about who you are. When you keep your promises, face difficult situations, develop useful skills, speak honestly, and take action despite uncertainty, you begin creating a reputation with the most important person in your life, yourself. Keep your word to yourself because confidence begins with the relationship you have with your own mind. Before you can expect other people to trust you, you must become someone you can trust. Every day, you make small promises to yourself. You say you will wake up at a certain time, complete an important task, exercise, study, practice a skill, stop wasting time, or finally begin something you have been postponing. These promises may seem insignificant, but they are constantly creating evidence about your character. When you repeatedly keep them, you teach yourself that your decisions have weight. When you repeatedly break them without a serious reason, you teach yourself the opposite. Eventually, you may begin doubting your own intentions. You may say, I am going to change. While another part of your mind quietly answers, you always say that. This internal disagreement weakens confidence more deeply than criticism from other people ever could. The solution is not to make dramatic promises. It is to make realistic commitments and honor them consistently. If you know you cannot realistically study for 5 hours every day, do not promise 5 hours. Promise 30 minutes and protect those 30 minutes. If you cannot completely transform your routine overnight, change one behavior and repeat it until it becomes part of you. Confidence grows through consistency, not through temporary bursts of enthusiasm. Every time you follow through when nobody is watching, you strengthen your internal authority. You begin to understand that your actions are not controlled entirely by mood. You can feel tired and still complete the important task. You can feel nervous and still make the necessary call. You can feel unmotivated and still practice. This does not mean ignoring legitimate exhaustion or forcing yourself beyond healthy limits. It means learning to distinguish genuine limitations from temporary resistance. Sometimes you need rest, and resting deliberately is not breaking your word. The important thing is that your choices are conscious rather than dictated by every passing emotion. Another important part of keeping your word is avoiding promises made in emotional moments. People often become inspired after watching someone successful and immediately create an unrealistic plan. They decide that tomorrow they will completely change their lives. They will wake up early, exercise for hours, read constantly, eliminate every distraction, and accomplish everything at once. A few days later, the excitement disappears and the entire plan collapses. This creates another broken promise. A better approach is to make commitments that survive ordinary days, not only motivated days. Your system should work when you are tired, bored, disappointed, or busy. That is where self-trust is created. You should also learn how to respond when you fail to keep a promise. Do not turn one failure into an excuse to abandon everything. Examine what happened. Maybe the commitment was unrealistic. Maybe your environment contained too many distractions. Maybe you did not prepare properly. Maybe you underestimated the difficulty. Identify the cause, adjust the plan, and return to action. Confidence does not require perfection. It requires the ability to recover. A person who trusts himself is not someone who never falls off track. It is someone who knows that falling off track does not mean staying there. Keeping your word also changes your identity. At first, you may think, I am trying to become disciplined. After enough repetition, the thought becomes, I am disciplined. You no longer need to negotiate with yourself every time an important task appears because your behavior has established a pattern. Your standards become clearer. Your excuses become less convincing. Your decisions become more deliberate. This is the quiet foundation of confidence. You are no longer depending on motivation, applause, or external pressure to make you act. You act because you have decided that your own word matters. When that relationship becomes strong, confidence stops being something you have to perform. It becomes something you carry naturally into your work, relationships, decisions, and challenges. Stop seeking constant approval because confidence becomes fragile when your sense of worth depends on the reactions of other people. If you need everyone to praise you, agree with you, understand you, or accept you, then you have given them control over your emotional state. One compliment can make you feel powerful, while one criticism can make you question everything about yourself. This creates a dangerous dependence. You begin making decisions based not on what you believe is right, but on what you think will receive the most approval. Slowly, you stop living according to your own standards and begin performing for an audience. Real confidence begins when you understand that other people's opinions are information, not commands. You should listen to intelligent criticism because it can reveal weaknesses you cannot see yourself. You should respect people with greater experience because they may have knowledge that can save you from unnecessary mistakes. But listening does not mean surrendering your judgment. Take what is useful, examine it carefully, and decide what deserves to influence your behavior. If you automatically change yourself every time someone disagrees with you, you will never develop a stable identity. People have different expectations. One person may want you to take more risks, while another wants you to remain safe. One person may think you talk too much, while another thinks you should speak more. One person may admire your ambition, while another may feel threatened by it. If you try to satisfy every opinion, you will eventually become confused about who you are. Confidence requires internal standards. Decide what values matter to you, what kind of person you want to become, and what behavior you are willing to accept from yourself. Then evaluate your progress according to those standards rather than constantly checking whether everyone approves. This does not mean becoming arrogant or refusing to consider other perspectives. Arrogance says, I cannot be wrong. Confidence says I can be wrong, and I can examine the evidence without losing myself. That distinction is important. A confident person can receive criticism without immediately becoming defensive. They can say, you may have a point, and then think about it. They can change their position when new evidence proves them wrong without feeling humiliated. Their identity is not so fragile that one correction destroys it. You should also become comfortable with rejection. Rejection is unavoidable if you are taking meaningful risks. You will not get every opportunity. Not everyone will like you. Some people will misunderstand your intentions. Some relationships will end. Some ideas will be rejected. If every rejection becomes proof that you are inadequate, you will eventually stop trying. You will choose safety over possibility. Instead, separate rejection from identity. Someone saying no does not automatically mean you are worthless. It means that particular person, organization, or situation did not choose you. Learn what you can, adjust when necessary, and continue moving. Another source of unnecessary insecurity is comparison. You may see someone else's success and immediately feel behind, but you are comparing your private struggles with their visible results. You rarely see their failures, sacrifices, uncertainty, or years of preparation. Compare yourself with your previous self instead. Ask whether you are becoming more capable, disciplined, knowledgeable, and courageous. This creates a healthier standard because your progress remains within your influence. Approval can still be enjoyable. Praise can feel good, and there is nothing wrong with appreciating recognition. The problem begins when recognition becomes necessary for you to feel valuable. You should be able to receive praise without becoming dependent on it, and receive criticism without being destroyed by it. Your confidence becomes stronger when your emotional center moves inward. You stop asking, what will everyone think? And start asking, is this consistent with the person I am trying to become? That question gives you direction when opinions around you become loud. When you no longer need constant approval, you become freer to speak honestly, take calculated risks, set boundaries, learn from mistakes. and pursue meaningful goals, you are not trying to become someone everyone approves of. You are becoming someone whose own respect is difficult to lose. Do difficult things on purpose, because confidence grows when you repeatedly prove to yourself that discomfort does not have to control your behavior. Most people wait for life to become comfortable before they expect themselves to feel confident. They avoid difficult conversations, challenging responsibilities, unfamiliar situations, rejection, and tasks where failure is possible. This avoidance creates temporary relief, but it also teaches the mind a dangerous lesson. If something feels uncomfortable, I should escape. Over time, your comfort zone becomes smaller. You become more sensitive to uncertainty because you have not given yourself enough opportunities to discover that you can handle it. Deliberately choosing manageable difficulty reverses this process. When you intentionally do something that challenges you, you create evidence that you can remain calm and functional even when your emotions are uncomfortable. The key is not to search for unnecessary suffering or place yourself in reckless situations. The goal is to choose challenges that stretch your abilities while remaining sensible and constructive. If you are nervous about speaking, volunteer to speak in a small meeting. If you fear asking questions, ask one when you normally remain silent. If you avoid difficult tasks, begin the hardest part before doing easier work. If you struggle to set boundaries, practice respectfully saying no when something conflicts with your priorities. Each experience expands your capacity. The first time may feel extremely uncomfortable. The second may still create anxiety, but repeated exposure changes your relationship with the situation. What once seemed terrifying becomes familiar. Familiarity reduces uncertainty, and reduced uncertainty often creates calm. This is one reason confidence cannot be created entirely through thinking. You can tell yourself for hours that you are capable, but your mind becomes more convinced when your behavior provides evidence. Imagine someone who is afraid of public speaking. They can watch hundreds of videos about confidence, repeat affirmations, and imagine success. But eventually they must stand in front of people and speak. Their first attempt may be imperfect, their voice may shake, they may forget a point, but afterward they discover something important. They survived. The next attempt becomes easier because the unknown is no longer completely unknown. This process applies to almost every area of life. Difficult conversations teach you that disagreement does not automatically destroy relationships. Rejection teaches you that hearing no is painful but survivable. Taking responsibility teaches you that pressure can be managed. Trying unfamiliar work teaches you that being a beginner is not a permanent condition. Failure teaches you that mistakes can be corrected. You should also learn to distinguish discomfort from danger. Your body may react strongly to uncertainty with nervousness, tension, or hesitation, but these sensations do not automatically mean something is wrong. Sometimes they simply indicate that you are entering unfamiliar territory. Instead of interpreting nervousness as a command to stop, treat it as information. Ask whether the situation is genuinely dangerous or merely uncomfortable. If it is safe and worthwhile, continue. You can act while nervous, you can speak while uncertain, you can begin while imperfectly prepared. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the ability to move according to your values while fear is present. Doing difficult things also teaches you something about yourself. You discover where your patience breaks, where your discipline weakens, and where your insecurities appear. These discoveries are valuable because you cannot improve weaknesses that you refuse to examine. If a difficult conversation makes you defensive, observe that reaction. If failure makes you want to quit immediately, study why. If criticism makes you doubt your identity, recognize the dependence on approval. The challenge becomes a mirror. Over time, deliberate difficulty creates psychological flexibility. You become less dependent on perfect conditions. You stop needing certainty before taking action. You become more willing to enter situations where the outcome is unknown. Your confidence becomes based not on the belief that everything will go according to plan, but on the knowledge that you can adapt when it does not. That is the deeper purpose of doing difficult things on purpose. Not to prove that you are fearless, but to prove repeatedly that fear, uncertainty, and discomfort do not have the final authority over your actions. Speak with calm certainty, because the way you communicate can influence how you experience yourself and how others respond to you. Confidence is not about speaking the loudest, talking the most, or dominating every conversation. In many situations, genuine confidence appears through calmness. A person who knows what they mean does not need to rush, over-explain, or constantly defend themselves. They can speak clearly, listen carefully, pause when necessary, and allow their words to stand without desperately seeking approval. This kind of communication begins with controlling your emotional reactions. When people feel insecure, they often speak too quickly because silence makes them nervous. They add unnecessary explanations because they fear being misunderstood. They apologize for harmless opinions. They change their position immediately when challenged. They may become aggressive because they believe aggression will protect their image. These behaviors often reveal uncertainty rather than strength. Calm certainty requires learning to tolerate the small discomfort of silence and disagreement. Before responding, pause. Ask yourself what you actually want to communicate. Choose the important point and express it directly. You do not need to fill every second with words. Silence can give you time to think, and thoughtful pauses often communicate greater control than hurried responses. Another important part of calm communication is learning to say what you mean without becoming hostile. If you disagree, you can say so respectfully. If something does not work for you, you can state the boundary clearly. If you made a mistake, you can acknowledge it without creating a long defense. If you do not know an answer, you can simply admit that you do not know. These behaviors may appear simple, but they require internal security. An insecure person often feels that admitting uncertainty will make them look weak. A confident person understands that pretending to know everything is far more damaging. Saying, "I do not know yet," leaves room for learning. You should also avoid unnecessary exaggeration. When you constantly make dramatic statements, people eventually learn that your words are driven by emotion rather than accuracy. Calm certainty is precise. Instead of saying, "You always do this," describe the specific behavior that concerns you. Instead of saying, "Everything is terrible," identify the actual problem. Precision makes communication stronger because it keeps you connected to reality. Listening is equally important. Confidence does not require turning every conversation into a performance. A person who constantly interrupts or redirects attention toward themselves may be seeking validation rather than communicating with strength. Listen to understand, ask questions, pay attention to what people actually say instead of preparing your next response while they are speaking. When you listen well, you become more informed, and information makes your responses more intelligent. Calm certainty also means being comfortable with disagreement. You will encounter people who challenge your opinions. Some will criticize you fairly, while others will simply disagree because their perspective is different. You do not need to treat every disagreement as a threat. Consider the argument. If there is truth in it, learn from it. If there is not, remain composed. You can say, "I understand your perspective, but I see it differently." That sentence contains confidence without unnecessary aggression. Your body language can support this communication, but it should not become a performance. Maintain natural eye contact, avoid constantly fidgeting, and allow your posture to remain open and steady. The goal is not to imitate someone else's personality. It is to become comfortable occupying your own presence. Most importantly, speak from preparation and conviction rather than from the need to impress. If you know your subject, your words become naturally clearer. If you know your values, your boundaries become easier to communicate. If you know what outcome you want, you become less distracted by emotional reactions. Calm certainty is therefore not merely a speaking technique. It reflects internal organization. Your thoughts are clearer, your emotions are less controlling, and your identity does not depend on winning every interaction. You do not need to prove that you are powerful. You simply communicate what you believe, listen to what others have to say, and remain capable of changing your mind when evidence demands it. That combination of clarity, restraint, and openness creates a form of confidence that does not need to announce itself. Build competence through daily practice because confidence becomes much stronger when it rests on real ability rather than imagination. Many people want to feel confident without doing the work that creates confidence. They want to walk into a room feeling capable, speak with authority, make difficult decisions, or perform at a high level while avoiding the uncomfortable process of learning. But the mind eventually notices the difference between appearance and substance. You may convince other people temporarily, but you cannot easily convince yourself that you are skilled when you know you have not practiced. Real confidence grows when repeated effort gives you evidence that your abilities are improving. If you want confidence in communication, practice communicating. If you want confidence in your career, develop the skills your work demands. If you want confidence in making decisions, study situations, make thoughtful choices, observe the results, and improve your judgment. Confidence is often the psychological result of preparation. The more prepared you become, the less dependent you are on luck and external reassurance. Daily practice is powerful because improvement rarely comes from one dramatic effort. It comes from repetition. A person who practices a skill for a short period every day may eventually surpass someone who occasionally works intensely but inconsistently. Consistency teaches your mind that progress is created through action. It also makes difficult tasks more familiar. The first time you perform a skill, you may need enormous concentration. After repeated practice, parts of the process become automatic. This reduces mental pressure and allows you to focus on higher level decisions. Practice, therefore, creates both ability and calm. You should also practice deliberately rather than simply repeating the same comfortable behavior. If you always do what you already know how to do, improvement slows. Identify the parts of your skill that are weakest and spend time strengthening them. If you struggle with speaking clearly, practice organizing your ideas. If you make poor decisions under pressure, study previous decisions and identify recurring mistakes. If you lack technical knowledge, focus on learning the concepts you repeatedly encounter. Deliberate practice requires honesty because you must be willing to see where you are weak. This is where feedback becomes valuable. Ask people with relevant experience what you could improve. Review your own work. Compare your performance over time. Do not treat every criticism as truth, but do not reject criticism simply because it is uncomfortable. Extract useful information and apply it. The goal is not to become obsessed with perfection. It is to become slightly better through each cycle of practice and correction. Competence also protects you from comparison. When you know that you are genuinely developing your abilities, another person's success becomes less threatening. You can admire someone who is ahead of you without deciding that their success proves your failure. Instead, their performance can become information. What do they do well? What can you learn? What habits help them improve? This turns comparison into observation rather than insecurity. You should also understand that competence takes time. In a culture that celebrates quick results, it is easy to become discouraged when progress feels slow. But meaningful ability is usually built through hundreds of ordinary repetitions that nobody sees. The visible result appears suddenly, but the preparation happened quietly. Do not underestimate boring practice. The repetitions that feel insignificant today may become the foundation of confidence tomorrow. Another important principle is to keep learning after you become competent. Confidence can become dangerous when it turns into certainty that you already know everything. Stay curious. Update your methods. Study people who challenge your assumptions. Continue improving even when others begin praising your ability. The strongest confidence is flexible because it is not afraid of learning something new. Daily practice also changes your identity. At first, you may say, I am trying to become good at this. After enough repetition, you begin seeing yourself as someone who practices, learns, and improves. That identity influences your behavior. You no longer depend entirely on motivation because practice has become part of who you are. You begin trusting your preparation because you know how much work you have invested. This is the confidence that lasts. It does not come from pretending to be exceptional. It comes from repeatedly becoming more capable. When your confidence is built on competence, criticism may sting, but it does not destroy you. Uncertainty may challenge you, but it does not paralyze you. And difficult tasks may intimidate you, but they do not convince you to quit. You know that if there is something you do not yet understand, you can learn it, practice it, and improve. That belief is grounded in evidence, and evidence is what makes confidence durable. Act before you feel completely ready, because waiting for perfect confidence can become one of the most effective ways to remain stuck. Many people believe that confident people act because they feel certain, while insecure people hesitate because they are afraid. In reality, confident action often develops in the opposite direction. People become more confident because they repeatedly act while uncertainty is still present. If you wait until fear disappears, until every detail is perfect, until everyone supports you, or until you know exactly what will happen, you may never begin. Life rarely provides that level of certainty. Important opportunities usually contain some risk, and meaningful growth almost always requires entering situations where you are not completely prepared. Acting before you feel ready does not mean being careless. It means understanding when you have enough information to take a reasonable first step instead of demanding absolute certainty. There is a difference between preparation and procrastination disguised as preparation. Preparation improves your ability to act. Procrastination keeps moving the starting line further away. You can research endlessly, plan endlessly, imagine every possible outcome, and still remain exactly where you started. At some point, you need experience, and experience can only be gained through action. Consider someone who wants to start a new project. They may spend months studying, designing, adjusting, and waiting for the perfect strategy. But until they actually begin, they do not know how people will respond, what problems will appear, or which assumptions are wrong. Action produces information that planning alone cannot provide. Once they begin, they can adjust based on reality. This is why the first step does not need to be perfect. It needs to be real. The same principle applies to communication. You may want to become better at speaking, but waiting until you feel completely confident means avoiding the very situations that would build confidence. Speak while nervous. Start with a small audience, make mistakes, notice what works, improve, then repeat. Confidence develops through the accumulation of these experiences. You should also understand that fear does not always indicate that you should stop. Sometimes fear simply means that the outcome matters to you or that the situation is unfamiliar. Your body may respond with tension, nervousness, or hesitation. Instead of interpreting these sensations as proof that you are incapable, recognize them as part of the process. You can feel nervous and still act intelligently. You can be uncertain and still make a reasonable decision. Courage is not waiting until you feel fearless. It is moving forward while accepting that fear may accompany you. Acting before you feel ready also teaches you how to recover from mistakes. If you demand perfection before starting, every mistake becomes a disaster because you have attached your identity to flawless performance. But if you expect the first attempt to be a learning experience, mistakes become information. You discover weaknesses, adjust your approach, and try again. This makes failure less threatening. You begin to understand that an imperfect attempt can be more valuable than a perfect plan that never leaves your mind. Another important part of acting before readiness is accepting that confidence may arrive gradually. You might take the first step with very little confidence. The second step may still feel uncomfortable, but after repeated action, the situation becomes familiar. Your skills improve, your understanding increases. Your fear decreases. Eventually, something that once required enormous courage becomes ordinary behavior. This transformation is not magic. It is the result of exposure, repetition, learning, and adaptation. You should also avoid confusing readiness with recklessness. There are situations where more preparation is necessary, especially when decisions involve serious consequences. Acting before you feel completely ready does not mean ignoring evidence, refusing advice, or taking unnecessary risks. It means recognizing that complete certainty is usually impossible and learning to act responsibly despite that uncertainty. Make the best decision available with the information you currently have, then remain willing to adjust when new information appears. This approach makes you more flexible and less afraid of making the wrong choice. The person who always waits for certainty becomes dependent on conditions they cannot control. The person who learns to act thoughtfully under uncertainty becomes more adaptable. Each action becomes a lesson. Each lesson improves the next action. Eventually, you stop asking whether you feel confident enough to begin and start asking what the next useful step is. That shift is powerful because it moves your attention away from emotion and toward behavior. Confidence is not a permission slip you must receive before taking action. It is often the result of taking action repeatedly, learning from the consequences, and discovering that you are more capable of adapting than you originally believed.